My name is Claudia Gordon. I'm the director of Villa Aurora, and I would like to welcome you to this evening's presentation. We are under the watchful eye of Lian and Martha Feuchtwanger, the former residents here of this house. I think that they would very much enjoy tonight's program because it continues the tradition of the get-togethers or salons that the Feuchtwangers would host here in the house, with lively discussions and presentations and different artistic positions from both Europe and the United States. Janet and Lorenz, the floor is yours.
Thank you to Claudia, thank you to her colleagues, and thank especially the match of myself and Lorenz. And that is to say, this book launch, which indeed it is, won't be like other book launches, because we discovered that we have quite a lot in common, although we had not known each other's work before, and a lot to say. And why should I thought, be here while another wonderful artist is the interlocutor? How much better for both of us to talk about our work, to show some work, to have a Q&A with all of you. So I am going to begin simply by showing you, although there's some paper in it, but this is the new book. It's a big book, and I wanted a big book. It's published by Die Stanz Verlag in Berlin, which has now published 3 of my books of photography and text. Photography and text is something we share. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And I'm going to just open a page at random so that you just get a little tiny sense. No, I'm not going to, because you'll get it from the images. So let us begin. Thank you for shutting off the lights. What I'm going to begin with is the first photograph, no, it's the second, that I took when I began in 1998. When I started, which was a great surprise to me, as I've lived a life as a writer and continue to, I might add, there was nothing in Mexico, in the small town where I began and where I now live, although it's actually a small city now, but all that was available was a disposable camera, a throwaway, a single use. And indeed, that is what this is. And it began my sense of seeing photography in part as the joy of seeing, and also as a philosophical investigation, because there is no depth of field with a throwaway. Everything appears on one plane. As here, what's through the window is actually behind me. And the street and the door is kind of falling into the car, but it's behind me also. And because there is only automatic focus, which some people might think, oh my goodness, is she really a photographer? Well, yes, but I like working low-tech, and I like working without manipulation. So everything you will see tonight follows that pattern, although not all with the disposable. But I got interested in how one can, in the best way of the word, confuse inside and outside, solid and fluid, using reflections to make a world that intermingles. Now I am going to show you the cover of the new book, which is this year, which only today did I realize connects with that very early first photograph. It's a windshield. I'm not a great fan of saying exactly what something is. It's a windshield, abandoned car, and some fronds from trees that have fallen onto the hood of the car. The important thing that I want you to see with this, though, is a commitment that I made with this book that it be bilingual. I am now, as I said, living in Mexico, as opposed to all of the years where I was, I had a house, but I would be a visitor. And this book very much stems from the fact of living there. And I began, as I always do in Mexico, by being ravished by color, by shape, by form, by texture, by the poetry of an image, the sense of more that's in the image. However, I had so many images. I knew they were a book, but I did not want to do a book because I became quite self-conscious about being a foreigner and not wanting to lay claim to, oh, this is my Mexico. Because in fact, it's not my Mexico. So I put the book aside for a little bit, and then I got very lucky. I'm telling you now the story of the book, and then we'll move to images. I had a physical therapist who would come to the house, as people do sometimes in Mexico, a great gift. And he was very, very bright and thoughtful, and we talked about all kinds of things. And then he started looking at images, 8.5 by 11, just, bad printer, but push pin to the wall. And I saw that he had a very remarkable way of both seeing, meaning visual acuity, and also connecting that with memory, personal, and history. And I took a big chance, and he took a big chance on me. I asked if he would collaborate with me on this book. And so now this is a book, Mexico, looking at Mexico. Mexico looks back, to people across borders from very different cultures, exploring and working together to find the places of connection. And I'm going to begin with an image. It is the first one in the book. I saw this in the window of a store, a little tienda, and I had no idea what it was. But I liked it. I liked the way it looked. And when I looked at it again, I was really into the roundness, I thought, oh my God, there's on a flat surface, there's so much roundness in this mysterious thing. And I was content to leave it as a bit of a mysterious thing. It made me think a bit of Cézanne, the round apples on the table where he can render roundness so beautifully. But then I showed the image to Alberto, and this is how we worked. I would have a lot of images. He would come over to the house. We would have good coffee and a little pastry, and I would show him a lot of different images, and if something sparked, then he would start talking, and I would start typing, and then we would just go on. We were sparking one another, and this turned out to be the first image in the book, and you can get a little sense of the unusual layout. The English is above, the Spanish, which is Mexican Spanish, below. And I am going to read you what it says. When I was a little boy in the shower, my grandmother used to scrub me with these. I remember water on the floor. These pads are called estropajos, and they're something that Mexicans have in common. At first, to a child, they're big and hard, but this changes with time. After they're used for a while, they get softer, and their name changes to Zacatitos. Now they have become part of our identity. They make us feel a connection to being Mexico, being Mexican. And so that for me is kind of an enunciatory chord. What do Mexicans have in common? This sensory experience. It was not Cézanne, it was a scouring pad. It was both a scouring pad and Cézanne because, Cézanne with quotes, why shoes? This was right outside my door, and some of them I am going to go by quickly. This was almost the cover, and obviously looking back, But this gives me the chance to say that when I put the book together, and the designers, they really were great about letting me have a kind of sequence that I wanted. I wanted nothing in the book that was folkloric, nothing that was merely documentary. Documentary is wonderful, merely does not mean to be that. It is simply to say I was going for something more poetic, and I wanted the cover to be more elusive than this image, which is here nonetheless because I like it. This image is walking and seeing down some stairs, the skull, someone just drew it. And then, of course, the beautiful frond above it. And the commentary on this has to do, and I'm not going to read them all, it would take much too much time. And they're not, by the way, not every image has a commentary, because that would be like a forced march, caption image. No, but this one does. And it is Alberto talking about his son, and how the son, who's 6 years old, would find it funny because he's not afraid of death. And that tells you quite a lot about certain aspects of life in Mexico. I mean, again, we're all afraid of death, but it's a different attitude toward death. This was part of a very large altar in the park for Day of the Dead. And I am going to read you and show you what is said on the page. And again, this is Alberto, my image, his words. And I did work with his words and shape them because my first love is poetry and I love concision, but his words. Look at the notebook. It's spiral bound, the kind students use. See the dirt, the bones of a hand, the sole of a shoe, heavy like the police wear. These faces represent the 43 students who disappeared from the Ayotzinapa Rural Teachers College in 2014 after being forcibly abducted in Iguala in Guerrero in Mexico. Are these photographs? No, they're drawings. Picture someone doing these drawings, then placing them here in the earth. Their edges have been burnt. It is believed that the students were burned. They are the faces of the massacres of the world, the Holocaust, Argentina, Ukraine, Ayotzinapa. The blue of the notebook, what is written in it? What is spoken? What do we hear? It is a collective voice. It was very important to me to include that sense of the political life and the difficulties of Mexico, and to really pay homage to that. And this image, I think, does. And this is right outside my front door, which pleases me no end. I don't quite know why, other than there's an intimacy about it, and I feel that way, perhaps deluding myself a little bit, but in my connection with Mexico. This is not an ordinary day. It is a fiesta. These two women have considerable ambiguity. They're sort of, and they're sort of, and there's, you can't quite figure out their look. How it happened that that hand came up with the skull coming into the frame is one of those wonderful mysteries that make up photography. Had to have been an intention, but was it? And I like having that mystery. This next one is kind of quintessential in the sense, yes, again, and it's a window, it's a, hood of a car, but together we have the metal of the windshield, the division between the hood and the windshield, and the braided palm of indigenous life, braided from Palm Sunday and kept there for good luck. I'm giving you a lot of kind of overly interpretive things because I should really give you more time to look, but I don't want to take up too much time. So there we are. Mexico, texture, mystery, stairs leading where? triangle under the stairs with things stored for later use. All of this, as well as the shapes and the forms, speaks to me, among other things, of the street around the corner. Not all of these are our city, by the way. I know. This one looks like a hopper, right? Everyone's thinking that. And at first I thought maybe I wouldn't include it because maybe there was something a little odd, looks like a hopper. Then someone said to me, what's wrong with seeing Mexico in a way that, why shouldn't there be a hopper-like image in Mexico? And this was underscored by how Alberto saw it, which was not as a hopper, although he's a very sophisticated guy, he could well have made that connection, but as a ticket booth, which is asking for money and where they could turn you away if you did not have the money. So once again, there's something multi-leveled, a more, that comes out in the text, comes out in the image, comes out in the conjunction of the two. And yes, if your good visual eye is saying, gee, these look like the scouring pads. Yeah, they do, although I was not thinking of that at the time. I just thought, my God, how wonderful this corolla, corona, crown, and then these little tendrils, whatever. I will just tell you that the text is a surprise because Alberto used it as an occasion to talk about that this kind of hair is associated with Afro-Caribbeans in Mexico and can be seen as a negative. In fact, he said to me, my skin is too dark. Well, of course it isn't, but it tells you about a way of thinking. This is simply a composition I like on the wall of a cafe, and these strange women in their frames, and then this almost Mondrian-like set of rectangles. So there's something of the past and of the very present. Here, a child looking a bit askance at an older woman whose hand is in the mouth of a calavera, a skull. And in the center, presumably a figure like a mother. Of course, you see how the reflective metal and the teeth and the hands, I mean, this is highly composed, although composed quickly, but it also has that sense of, oh, what is that? The child, what is that? I don't understand it. The older woman, I am not afraid to put my hand into death. This one, I don't know how well it shows up, but not bad, actually. This is in an indigenous part of town. The fact that she's wearing a mask tells you it's COVID, she's cooking. But if truth be told, even though in photography there's kind of a sense that you don't say things like this, but I identify with that little girl way up there. She is the observer, the one who looks, the one who wonders. Maybe, who knows? Who knows what she'll grow up to be? This one is another one I almost didn't include. It's so striking. And of course, this crocodile, the feathers. And I thought, you know, this could be one of those, oh, wow, folkloric images. But this is what Alberto said, and it turned my thinking around. This man is not a warrior. He is a dancer. Maybe during the day, he's a taxi driver. But when he wears this mask, the crocodile talks through him. This gives him power. And so I thought, this stays in because, again, it's a multidimensional sense of what is is to be somebody who you might encounter dancing in the town square and say, okay, well, this is just a funny thing. It's just very idiosyncratic. I discovered a parked car, a windshield, with someone's very odd personal touch, and I enjoyed it. You could say, and I'm not going to, but you could say it's a little surreal. The reason I'm not going to is because surreal is too easy in Mexico. Everyone thinks surreal. They think surrealists. But really, it's much more an inclusive sense of how unlike things belong together in a frame. It's not quite surreal. That's really a different sense of the world. Ah, yes. This self-evidently is a cabbage, and I thought you would enjoy this because of what Alberto said, which I think, yes. The destiny of cabbage is to be a snack. Cabbage and salsa. In the lines of the bottle are reflections. You know that you're there, which I did not, I still have trouble finding it, but I do know that's true. If someone asks you to show your passport, talking to me, show them this photo, he will say, okay, you can go, you're Mexican. In Mexico City, on Saturday mornings at a particular spot, people gather to dance, mostly danzón, which is an older dance, but young people are there too. And I took a lot of photos there. I was very moved by this sense of people getting dressed up and having such dignity in the dance. You could think that this is a moment that I caught in the middle of a movement. It's not. This is part of the dance. They are standing there. He has a traditional danzón arm dangling. It's a position. Alberto had been a dancer in Veracruz. He explained all this to me, and they are waiting. They are waiting for the music to give them the cue to start up dancing again. So it really is a frozen moment. And then they dance. Yes. And this is one of those strange things that happen. Obviously, a reflection. And I'm going to read you this, but do look at the picture while I'm doing this. I hope I'm not taking away from the image. Well, you'll tell me if I am. The reflection is contained within the trunk of a tree. This doesn't seem likely. It goes against what we expect. But the world is different from how we expect it to be. This is a picture of the moment that they come together, the tree and the reflection, a little like the moment of taking a photograph. This book is all these moments, boom, in one moment. Thanks, that's great. This one is simply a sense, for me, of the Mexican sublime. And yes, it's the golden hour, all kinds of echoing shapes and mystery, but I see it as having a kind of veil almost over it in the quality of the light. And a few more. Yes, this image is in Merida, and again, the text says, what is this? What was it? A velvet sofa that was once a banca de iglesia for kneeling on velvet, maybe from an old hacienda that had a chapel but is used now for a hotel. I look and I see beauty, light, composition. Don't see what it's used for. And then a few more lines about that, but the last line is what I like. Each picture we have looked at and then looked again and more deeply becomes more of a mystery. And even though I talk a certain amount about mystery, it is not mystifying, because that's just sort of, you know, kind of cheap. Why would you want to mystify something? It's more an appreciation of not knowing, of keeping things suspended in their multiple meanings. This is the last photograph in the book. I think I won't tell you what it is. You can ask if not later. However, the last text is written by both Alberto and myself. We did this sometimes. And by the way, if I changed his texts, I would get his approval and vice versa. So it was a very productive, generative, respectful connection that ended in a deep, not ended, goes on in a deep friendship. And what this says, thank you. Here's the last image. Like a telescope, this window is another portal. The moment of a photograph is the moment to open your heart. This is an image at the end. It is also an image of return. Now you go through the portal, the child, me, in a shower being scrubbed. That is you, too. And that is the last image. There's quite a bit more. It's a very rich book. There's about 90 images, but you don't want to see all those, but I hope you will later because the book will be on a table for display, etc. But at this moment, it is your turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show fewer pictures, and it was very interesting because Janet picked this series that she found on my website, and I'm not sure if you looked at the German or the English version, because you can look at my web page in German or in English, and in German I have letters, because I documented a prison, and it was a prison building that had been inhabited by women the last years before it closed, and I came in to photograph it just half a year after they moved to another prison, and I photographed it, put these images up on my website, and I got letters from former prisoners. And so I'm going to show some pictures and read some very short extracts of the letters. I have to say I worked in color here, which I hardly do, because how can you show these colors in black and white? So I had to shoot in color. Okay, and this is room 505, and a woman wrote to me. It was the first letter I got. Dear Mr. Kienzle, I came across your website while searching for reports on the Lookout prison and looked at your pictures. I must say that you have captured these detention rooms very well with your lens. Not only because you are a professional photographer, unfortunately, I was imprisoned in this prison from June 2002 to March 2004. Unfortunately, I went through hell there, which you were not able to portray in your pictures. But I also read your report, and I have to say that you understood it without knowing how you felt there. And when I saw the prison room 505 in your photos, where I had to stay for so long, and even after 6 years, I was still in tears because the memories of the torture came flooding back. And I can tell you that the walls were never colorful. They were covered in paint that was crumbling away. You couldn't capture all that in your pictures. Yours sincerely, M. Elias. It's a similar room. Another letter. Dear Mr. Kienzle, I also found your website and the photos of Lookout prison by chance. I was imprisoned in this prison between 1978 and the beginning of 1984 during the GDR era. At that time it was a penal institution, and I served 18 months and almost 20 months for attempted escape from the Republic. In my time, things looked completely different in Luckau. Another email. Mr. Kienzle, I came across your site purely by chance as I'm looking for evidence for my pension from that time. The pictures all look nice, especially all three. That one. That was the couch in the so-called segregation, but the room looked different. It had tiles on the walls and floor because of all the cold water which you got sprayed over from a sea hose afterwards. I spent 4 weeks in this segregation because I had resisted a gang elder from Gang 3. I left 3 years of my youth there. I still struggle with that time today. Doesn't stop, and I'm 60 today. All the best to you, Die Wegener. This actually I found on a window and I put it on a chair to arrange it a little bit. The last letter. Dear Mr. Kienzle, your photos of the former Luckau Youth Center, later Hafthaus 2, have absolutely nothing in common with the situation back then. I'm 71 years old and was there in the early 1960s. And then he goes on very long what was where and how it was organized. While the building didn't change, at least on the outside, the character of the inmates changed over time. In my time, at the beginning of the 1960s, the ratio of inmates was around 80% criminals to 20% political prisoners. And this ratio later shifted more in favor of political prisoners. In Luckau, we young people were subjected to a military drill that could easily compete with the Wehrmacht. Some members of the supervisory staff were unmistakably former members of the Wehrmacht. It goes on and on. So this is the last image, and I'm going to read very shortly from what I wrote on my website to the text to which they reacted as well. In March 2006, I went for the very first time into a real prison. I participated in a tour of the recently closed prison in Luckau, a small town southeast of Berlin. We were informed that the various prison buildings would be converted into a cultural center. First of all, we visited Jailhouse 2, that was this part, a former monastery which was founded by the Dominicans in the 14th century. It was later used as an orphanage and from 1747 until the autumn of 2005 as a prison. We climbed up the trodden-out steps of the ice-cold stairway, which appeared to have been stored in the masonry since the beginning of time. I felt very sorry for every person who ever had to use the stairway. And in contrast to these impressions, the cells were painted in unexpectedly bright colors. They appeared to have been just recently vacated by their occupants. Then I got the assignment to document the whole prison, also not only this building, but other buildings as well. And on a hot day in June 2006, the prison gate was opened for me and I stood alone in the yard with my equipment. I was assured that the gate could be opened from the inside at any time, which reassured me considerably. In the basement of Jailhouse 2, I was greeted by very humid air and a wall covered with black mildew. As I climbed up the stairs, the air got warmer. On the top floor, underneath the flat tin roof, the air was unbearably hot. There was a strange odor, a mixture of sweat and the smell of dead pigeons. They had entered the building through broken windows, but had no longer found their way out. Nevertheless, this floor was the most interesting for my work. The cells were still furnished with beds, tables, and wardrobes, even plastic plants. During my work, the thought came to my mind that the inmates could not simply step outside to get some fresh air, as I did several times. So, that is about my work on the Luckau prison that
I love
Janet
it.
chose, and we found out how? We both worked with text that someone else sent us or told us, yeah. So, and this is where we found a connection.
There and something else, which was very, very striking to me. And this only will make sense, I think, if you have a broader picture of each of our work. But it seems to me, and I know I've said this to you before, but I'm going to say it again, that there's an overall project to everything. If you go to Lorenz's website, a lot of different series. If you go to mine, you'll see quite a few other things as well, a lot of it. But there are characteristics that are bigger than an individual series. Yeah. And what I felt very strongly with you was a sense of haunting, of loss, of kind of almost digging through earth to discover, and then using the camera, however insufficient an instrument it is, as was pointed out here, to reclaim. For me, I think my overall project, and again, you know, pinning it down this way is not always very artistic, but it interested me. For me, it is complexity, a multidimensional view of the world, and a sense of what I will call poetic. It's a word that's overused and can seem poetic, but no, the moment of gasp and of poetry is something that I know I feel very deeply, and I want to give testimony to that and give access to it. And so, you know, there's a lot, this is not a good or bad in any way at all, but I do know that there are a lot of photographers who do this and who do that. And there's a voice, you can see it, you can feel it, but this sense of an overall project is what drew me to your work. And I just think, I think it's important. I think that artists, all of us, we follow a trail, and it's not always clear, like the woman you discovered in East Germany, and you found her work and brought it up. But I'm just saying that to you. I don't know if that resonates for you.
I think it's the older you get, the more confident you become. Can we turn on the lights, maybe? Yeah. It has to do with experience. The more you see, the more you have photographed, the more you know what you do, really. Yeah, I have to say. Yeah. So, and I discover what happened to me is I photographed this prison for my project that I'm doing here about Alfred Döblin. I went to a prison because in his book Berlin Alexanderplatz he writes about an inmate who is released from prison, but he's haunted by having been in the prison. At the same time, it helps him to remember the routines of the prison to survive in the wild world. Yeah, because he's released to the city and the city kind of eats him. So yeah, he already remembers in the prison there were rules and they kind of helped him. And then I did the project about Ursula Raschke, whose archive I discovered in a museum, and we found out she was in a women's prison for 5 years, from 49 to 54, which was very well known in the GDR as being very, very bad. So, and I don't know why these things happen, but they seem, well, they happen to me. Yeah,
they happen to me. They happen, which is, thank goodness, because I think it gives us a sense of.
And they are logical in the end, yeah?
Yeah, they are. They are logical in a way, in the sense that you can speak of them and show them. And I just want to quote, there's an earlier book of mine that is photographs of Los Angeles during COVID. And I ended the introduction to that with a quote from Machado saying, "There is no path. You make the path as you walk." And yes,
Yeah.
yes, we're walking. The other thing I want to raise before turning this over to Q&A, and you'll tell me if we're on time, in time, whatever, is that for me, I've collaborated before because I've worked in theater and I've worked in film, but my basic tendency is not to collaborate. I love to be alone. I love to do the work I do quietly by myself. So working with Alberto really opened a much more expansive world to me. Whether or not that world will continue, I just don't know, because this was very organic. This did not set out like, I took a chance on him, he took a chance on me. I could have been some flaky gringa. We took chances on each other, and it happened. But I just would like to read the very end of my introduction, because it goes back, and again, everything is English and Spanish. So this is the Spanish, and I'm not going to try to do that. Alberto has told me about his 6-year-old son, Geronimo, who you heard about before, who also shares his sensitivity to visual images. As we worked on this book, I sent batches of my photos home to Hero. At times, my printer would balk and spit out only a third of the picture. To me, that was a mistake, the paper destined to be discarded. But Alberto stops me. That's good. Hero can use the rest of the page to make his own drawing. Here is what else I've come to want, to go deeper into my own ways of seeing, because that is what I have to offer. To recognize that what I do not know can be a gift, to share a piece of paper.
I love this when I read it.
Yeah, so collaboration, is that something that you want to talk about at all?
Yeah, I love collaboration. So I think the older I get, I don't like so much to do things on myself. So
As I get older, I like it more.
yeah,
I don't know.
no, but the collaboration is so rich because you don't have to do everything yourself, first of all. Yeah, and many heads have more ideas. So
Well, this
yeah.
certainly was true with this book. Such a rich
And
experience.
sometimes we're talking here about art projects, but I have work projects. You go to a big museum and you are meant to photograph something that is impossible to photograph. So if you are together, you can always lean a little bit on the other person and find the solution together. So
This is true. This goes to one of my favorite lines, which I attribute to the writer Colette, but which may or may not be true. Always lean a little way against the direction in which you naturally incline. This is the moment for questions. When I had difficulty getting film processed, which every photographer has run into, I mean, it's the moment where you think, should I go digital? And then you think, oops, if I go digital, will it look like my work? And then you realize, yes, it does, because obviously what you're bringing to it is not technically dependent. That said, I went up to an iPhone. The thing about getting what you want, I have blown up the disposable for a show I had. The images were 72 inches high and 43 inches wide. You have to like blur, not blur because it's a mistake. You are a master of focus, so this is not about, for me, I really do celebrate the blur that creates a world that is not so sharp in its outlines. So you can do that with the disposable if you.
I work with a camera that is very sharp, but I work with movement because I have long times. So the leaves are moving, people are moving, and I like this very much because this is going back to the very, I'm very nostalgic. But in the beginning, people have had to sit like this for 10 minutes to get a portrait taken, yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the concentration I get through working with an old camera that is slow.
A wooden camera.
A wooden camera.
Yeah. And I started thinking about how much of our more conventional vision in photography, but in general, is to isolate. This is what I want you to see. This is it. I'm really more of an image maker and a visual poet than I am a photographer.
Might sound strange, but we use the same focal length equivalent to the sensor size or the film size, because the iPhone has 28 millimeter equivalent, and I have the same equivalent with a large format camera. And if I do a portrait, I use something different sometimes, but I just need the one lens because it shows me everything. Yeah, I can go further or a little bit further away. Yeah, it's all I need. And many photographers, they need, I don't know, a suitcase full of lenses to take their pictures. Yeah. For me, it makes no sense, yeah, because when you have done this long enough, you have your own focal length. You know how to work with it. I want always a connection of the things in the image. Yeah, not one thing.
But yes, and I do think that the means are there to be explored, but they're not primary.
It's just your tool.
Yeah.
However the camera looks and works.
Yeah.
So your conversation with Alberto was in English?
Well, it was both. People said to me, why didn't you just record it? Well, no, it never even occurred to me to record it. It was much more interesting to have him talk and me do this and me ask a question and me have an idea and just keep going that way, so that the texts are like pages, that needed condensing. But
the recorder is intimidating to many people. Yeah, so once you turn it off, they tell you wonderful things. The first woman that wrote to me, M. Elias, I never thought about it, but she sent a letter and I thought, well, this would be great to add, because I thought my text is so poor. Well, I tried to write for each project, but I thought this is much more direct. So I asked her, and she said yes, and I asked her, can I write your name? And she said, yes, but just M, and also not the full first name, because she tried to get back into society. So the other interesting thing, by the way, is she was there after the reunion, and the other ones were there before, but things haven't changed much. So that was shocking to me. These letters are really very long. What I read is maybe 20% or 10%. So, but they were all looking more or less for proof for their pension. I don't know what it means to have been in prison, if you get more or less, but that's how they found it, my website. So
I find it very moving because also it becomes a reflection on history and memory and how we pretty much can't quite grasp either. I just found all of that very kind of fertile territory.
I have to put some salt in this now, because I showed this to the museum director, because there was a museum that moved into this building, and because they have a prison exhibition, I said, well, you can use this maybe in your exhibition. And she said, well, you cannot prove that they are true. She felt we should not criticize the prison.
But I do find that the insistence on proof is the sign of ridiculous. It's a sign of fear.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Let's put it that way. And I'm still in contact with this woman, by the way. But I should tell her about that. We have a talk today about that. So well.
Well, we have a reception prepared for you, so we can also continue this conversation over a glass of wine. I want to thank both of you very, very much for sharing this important work with us, and yeah, I wish you a wonderful evening.